Hey folks, welcome to Wolfbane's Gaming Den. Today we have another tutorial for you. We'll be covering the teach for Babylonia, game by the one and only Dr. Rainer Knizia, published by Ludonova Games, and it's designed for 2 to 4 players. It's expected to play in roughly about 60 minutes. But as we'll see, realistic playtime might be less more often than not, but we'll come to that later. So let's go to the table. Let's look at what setup, turn structure, and the rules look like with some examples of the plays as well. And hopefully this will allow you to get the game to the table a little bit faster. Let's go to the table and see how it plays. So welcome to the table, everyone. Here we have the game set up for a 4-player game. So as you can see, the entire board has been populated with different city tiles and farm tiles, as well as these ziggurats. The setup is the board setup is slightly different based on player count, so we'll go through those as we walk through the setup steps. We also have player pieces for 2 players laid out, even though the game is set up for 4 players, and that is purely for ease of display. So just pretend that there are 2 more players on either side with their own holders and tokens set up, so to speak. So with that, let's start by looking at how the game board is set up. Over here you have the board, and obviously you can see the points track around the border of the board itself. To set up, lay down the board outright. If you're playing with a 4-player game, the entire board will be used. You will look out for the hexes that have a dark blue border surrounding it. The borders are fairly thick, so hopefully easy to identify. There will be 5 of these on the entire board, so you will place those 5 ziggurat tokens on each of those spots. Next up, you will search for all the different hexes that have a dark, well, not exactly dark, but a thick green border surrounding it. And then you will shuffle all the tiles that come in the game itself. So these are city tiles and these are farm tiles. You will sort of like put them face down, give them a shuffle, and randomly put them out throughout the board. And you will be putting them out on all of the spaces that have the dark green border around the hexes. Assuming you've been able to identify it correctly, in a 4-player game, all the different tiles that come in the box will be used. So there's not going to be anything left over. Once you've done that, take your individual player pieces. By that, basically what I mean is these different tokens that you get, the holder that you have for putting down the tokens, and your points marker. So the point marker will go at 0. Put these face down, give them a shuffle, and then randomly draw 5 tokens, which you will put on the holder itself. This will be your hand as you play the game. Next up, you will pull out the ziggurat tiles. I believe they're called cards in the rulebook, but these are actually thick tiles. The game comes with 9 of these, and they're all numbered on the bottom left. For a starting game and for the standard rules, you will use the ziggurat tiles that are numbered between 1 and 7. So 8 and 9 will be put to the side and will be used for a variant, which we'll cover later on. So 7 tiles will be laid out to the side of the board in a way that everybody can have a quick look at it when and as required. And with that, that's pretty much the setup. It's fairly easy to set up and get started. Now let's quickly go through the differences if you're playing with slightly different player colors. With slightly different player counts. So as you can see on the board itself, you have land regions, and then you have water regions in between. So there are 2 bodies of water that are flowing across, separating out 3 different land regions. If you're playing a 4-player game, you're using the entire board. But if you're playing with a 3-player or a 2-player game, certain islands will not be used in those games. As you can see, I forget which one's north and which one is south, but this island over here is smaller compared to the one way on the other side. So the center island is always going to be used regardless of the player count you're playing with. If you're playing a 3-player game, you will use the center island and you will use the larger island on the side. And I'll quickly check what they're called. So this is the south island basically. So you'll be using the south island and the central island and populate those with the different tokens. The rulebook does specify which tokens need to be taken out based on player count, so make sure you've removed those first, and then put down the remaining ones on the spots. And again, once you've removed the right number, the spaces and the number of tokens left will match exactly. So that's how you'll know you've set it up correctly. If you're playing with a 2-player game, that's when the other island, the smaller one, over here, and the center island are going to be used. In both those cases, when you're playing with the smaller player count, the water bodies will always be available for you to put tiles down at. So these never get blocked regardless of player count in question. So with that, that's the primary difference based on if you're playing with player counts. Otherwise, the rules are pretty much identical regardless of whether you're playing a 2-player, 3-player, or a 4-player game. Once you're done with setup, choose a starting player randomly, and then you're ready to start. Now, how does the flow of the game work? On your turn, you're basically going through 3 different steps as you're playing the game. First, you'll be taking tiles from your hand, and you will be putting them out on the board. Second, once you've done that, you will score the cities if scoring needs to be done, and you will score the ziggurats if a scoring for those needs to be done, if those are considered completed. And then thirdly, you will refill your hand back up to 5. So on your turn, the first action is you can play down tiles on the board itself. Within the playing tiles action, there are 2 different options that you have. First, you can play any 2 tiles on the board, on any hex that's available. And by available, it basically means it must be a hex that's empty that you can put it down in. There is no restriction in terms of where you can go. So if I had a token here, I could very easily place my second token here. It does not need to have a connecting path going through it. Although, as you will see with the rules, there is a benefit to having a connecting path going through it. So the first option that you can do with placing tokens is you can put down any 2 tokens anywhere, as long as it is available. If you're going on a land region, the tokens will be placed face up. If you're going on a water region, and you can identify these fairly easily, so if you're looking at the artwork and it's not completely clear if it's land or water, look inside the hexes. They will have wave symbols going through it, and that will confirm that that is considered a water region or a water hex. If you're placing a tile on a water hex, they will always go face down. They will never be face up. So placing here is only important to signify that you can connect one of your tiles to perhaps another one of your tiles on the other side. But the symbol that's underneath the tile no longer matters at that point if it is played there. So first option for playing tiles is you can take 2 tiles, place them anywhere, and that's it. The second option that you have for placing tiles on the board is if you're playing farmer tiles, you can place 3 or more of them on the same turn. And this might be a good time to just have a quick look at what kind of tiles you get in the game. So I'll put some of these out here as an example. This is considered a farmer tile, and you can identify it because it will have an image of a person with a sickle in hand and grains on one of the other hands. The other 3 kind of tiles are considered noble tiles. For the purposes of the game, they will function somewhat similarly. The only thing that will matter is symbols that you need to match later on. But these 3 symbols will be considered noble tiles. This is considered a farmer tile. All of these 4 types together are considered your clan tokens. So let's keep that in mind. Now, taking these back in hand. So the second option, as we were going through it, is one where you can place down a token. If you're placing farmer tokens and they're all farmer tokens, you can place them. You can place 3 or more of these. So that would be the only way in which you can place more than 2 tokens on your turn, barring some abilities that come up with these tiles. So when you do this, and I'll maybe pull out a few farmer tokens just to illustrate with examples. So let's do that very quickly. So all 3 are farmer tokens or tiles, and I can put them down either in a connecting path or I can put them down separately somewhere. The one restriction you need to be aware of when you're putting down the farmer token action, where you're putting down 3 or more of these, is that none of these can go in the water region. So unlike the first option, where I could put water tiles, where I could put tokens in the water region, when playing only farmer tiles of 3 or more number, they cannot go in the water body. So keep that in mind. So once you're done with that, you would have completed the first step of the 3 steps you need to do on your turn. Now, obviously, you want to play them with a specific objective in mind. So let's look at how some of those strategies may work based on where you're placing these out. So to start off with, every time you place a tile that is next to a ziggurat, you will score for all the ziggurats on the board that have one of your tiles next to it. And this will happen every time you're placing a tile down. So on my turn, if I were to, and let's say for example the board is empty, I'm placing down my first tile here, I will score for this ziggurat because this is the only ziggurat that I have a tile connecting to it. If perhaps on the same turn I chose to play another tile, and let's say for example it went here, now I've placed a token, one of my clan tokens next to another ziggurat, and at this point I have two ziggurats that have my tokens next to it. I will score 2 points. So this can really start ramping up as you have more of your tokens next to the 5 possible ziggurat locations out on the board, and you will score this every time when you're placing down a token. And it doesn't matter if it is a noble token or if it is a farmer token. If you're placing tokens next to these farm tiles, the farm tiles I might have mentioned earlier are the ones that have the green background. The city tiles are the ones that have a blue background. The farm tiles will always have either a number printed on it or they will have a square printed on it. The city tiles will either have 1 symbol printed on it, 2 symbols printed on it, or 3 symbols printed on it. And these symbols correspond to the different noble tiles that you have in your hand that you can potentially play out. So on your turn, if you want, if you're playing tiles that are next to one of these, you can use a farmer tile to pick up one of the farm tiles and score it. The way that it will work is you must have one of your tiles already next to a farmer tile, in which case you can take your farmer tile, put it where the farm tile is, you will take it and then you will score that particular token. The one that you must have that connects to the farm tile to begin with can be any tile as long as it's one of yours. It can even be a face down one if that were the case, but it must be one of yours, your own. So let's say for example, if I had done this on my turn and then I can play a farmer token on this spot and I can pick this up. As soon as I do this, these will score. So whenever you're picking up a farm token that has a printed value on it, and these values range, I'm just quickly scanning over the board, range between 5 and 7, you will score those points immediately. So if I were to pick this up, I would score 7 points right away. So this will move up here as an example. On the other hand, if I were to pick up one of the tiles that farm tiles that have a square on it, I will score points based on the total number of city tiles that everybody has in front of them. Now, at the start of the game, obviously, all the city tiles are on the board and nobody has any. So this would not really get me any points and would not be a very smart move if I were to do that. But let's say, for example, over the course of the game, certain tiles were picked up by different individuals. So let's say this went to my friend over there. This perhaps I had picked up, and then perhaps I had picked this one up as well. And then on my turn, I'm connected to this farm tile, and then I will place a farmer token to pick this up. So in this case, I will look at all the city tiles that are in front of all of the players, not just me, all the players, and I will score that many in points. So in this particular case, there are 3 city tiles in front of everybody, 2 in front of me, 1 in front of my opponent. So I will score 3 points, and I will take the 3 points on the scoring track right away. And then this will come to the side, and I can take it, and then that spot where the farm tile used to be will be occupied by the new farmer tile. So that's how you would score farm tiles if you are placing down your tokens next to them. Now, the way that you can collect these tiles, the city tiles, are by completely surrounding the city tiles. The way that surrounding a city tile works is, let's look at a couple of examples. So this is one where all the surrounding hexes are land hexes. So the only way this can be considered surrounded is if there are tokens all around it. So in this particular case, I mean, it's all mine just for illustrative purposes, but this could be a combination of any number of players. So there could be some of mine, some of my opponents. As soon as the last one to surround it is placed, this city would be considered surrounded. And I'm really at this point going into the second step on your action. So maybe I'll just quickly recap to make sure that we're on track. So the first action is you're putting down the tiles on the board. and you're putting them down either any two of your clan tiles, so they can be any symbol. If you're going on a river tile, it's face down. If it's on a land tile, it's face up. Or if you're playing only farmer tiles, you can play 3 or more farmer tiles on the board. If you're putting them down next to ziggurats, you score those points immediately every time you do that. If you put them farmer tile down on the farm, you score those immediately as well. However, on your turn, if you've surrounded city tiles, and this perhaps is, let's say this was a city tile here, just realized that was perhaps not a very good example. If you've surrounded this, then on the second step, you're supposed to score the city tiles that have been completely surrounded and score the ziggurats that have been completely surrounded. So in this case, this would be considered completely surrounded, and we would score this immediately. Now, the way that the scoring for this will work is, and on your turn, if you've surrounded more than one city tile, you will score each one of those. But the active player chooses what sequence that they're scored in. So in this particular case, we've surrounded all of these. You will look at the symbol at the center of the city tile, and you will look at the symbols on the tiles that are connected to it. Now, when I say connected to it, it means the ones that are directly adjacent to it. So these two, for example. But it could also mean tiles that are much further away, but they're still connected using a path through some of your tokens. So in this particular case, let's say if this were here and this were here. So this is this symbol corresponds to this one, and this one. Even though this is not directly adjacent to this, it is still connected to it through an unbroken path of your own tokens. So in this case, you will look at the symbols, and for each one matching symbol that you have connected to it, you will score 2 points. And this will happen for everybody. So even if my opponent had a star symbols around it, they would score 2 points as well. So in this case, let's say, for example, I will score 6 points. So that's basically 3 tokens multiplied by 2 for that symbol. If my opponent had, let's say, for example, 2 star tokens connected somehow, they would score 4 points as well. Even though perhaps they're not the ones who have completed it, but I completed it. So that's what having your placements done earlier comes into benefit as well, even if you're not the one who's completing it at that point. Once that happens, whoever completed the tile is not necessarily the one who will pick up the city tile. For picking up the city tile, you will look at who has the most tiles that are directly surrounding the city itself. So obviously there are 6 spaces available around it. If you have the majority, more than anybody else, the tile now belongs to you. If you don't, it obviously belongs to whoever does. So you may complete it, but somebody else may get the tile. If you're ever tied, there is no tiebreaker. The tile is basically just put to the side of the board, and nobody really gets it at that point. So you're scoring for the symbols that match. You will also immediately score the cities. And by that, what I basically mean is, once it is decided who gets the city, whoever has cities in front of them will get points. So if I had, let's say, for example, if I won this and I get this right now, and let's say this was the 3rd tile that I won, and my opponent had 2 tiles, I will score 3 points, and my opponent will score 2 points. My opponent is scoring the points even though they may not be the one to get the majority, even though they may not be the one to finish covering up the city itself, or they may not even be the ones to have any tiles surrounding the city. So in this particular case, if it were just all me, as a hypothetical example, my opponent still gets the 2 points because they have that city tile. So it is beneficial to have city tiles regardless of who's completing a city and who's getting the majority and getting the tile or the token itself. It's an important thing to keep in mind. Now, so we talked about how to score cities if they're completely surrounded as part of the second step of your action. The third step before we go on to the third step, the other thing that can also happen is you can possibly surround a ziggurat. So let's quickly go back and have a look at how this would work. So let's say, for example, the ziggurat is now surrounded. You do not get points for completing a ziggurat, but what you will get is whoever has the majority once this is completed, not the person completing it, but the person that has the most, they will be able to pick up one of these ziggurat tiles and take it in front of them. Now, most of these ziggurat tiles come in 2 different varieties. So as you can see here, this one, for example, has a sort of like a ×1 printed at the bottom right, whereas this one has an infinity symbol at the bottom right. So these tiles can either give you a one-off benefit that you will just basically take the benefit and then sort of like put it face down somewhere else because you're basically done with that tile for the game, or you will keep it face up in front of you and it will give you some sort of an ongoing ability over the course of the game. We'll have a look at what the abilities are right near the end once we're done through the rules, but just keep in mind that this is the key benefit you get as a result of having majority around the ziggurats. You do not necessarily score points directly by doing that, but it will give you good abilities or good benefits over the course of the game. There is no limit to how many ziggurat tiles you can have in front of you. So if you're one of those who have managed to capture all 5, then by all means take the ones that are applicable. The one difference between the ziggurat tokens and these other tiles are the farm tiles are always replaced by a farmer token. These are never filled. These are just taken by the player that has the majority. But the ziggurat markers always stay on the board. They never go away. It's an important thing to keep in mind. So with that, that's the end of the second step. So first step, you're putting down tokens. Second step, if a city has been surrounded or a ziggurat has been surrounded, you will score for those. The one quick item that I'll just mention, which I have not covered yet, is the water region that you have. They may still be empty and you can still consider one of the hexes to be completed or one of the cities to be surrounded. So if we can just have a look at a quick example. So let's look at this region, this city. This city has 3 land tiles next to it, 3 land hexes, sorry, next to it, and then 3 water hexes next to it. If somebody were to have 3 of their tokens on the 3 land tiles, and even though these are empty, this city is still going to be considered surrounded. And then everything else that happens with the surrounded city still happens at that point. So just something to keep in mind. Of course, you may have some players may have tokens or markers face down surrounding it as well. That is still possible and that will still happen, and these will contribute towards determining the majority for that location as well, as a reminder. But you don't need it to consider a city completed. This would be enough. All right, so second action we've covered, where you score the cities and the ziggurats that have been completed. The third step is basically you're refilling your hand up to 5. There is a tile in here that allows you to increase your hand limit to 7, but unless you're unless you're the player that holds this tile, you will always have a hand size of 5 at the start and at the end of your turn. So once you're done with it, the game will continue. You're done with your turn. You will go clockwise around the table. Everybody else will take their turns, and then it comes back to you. The game will continue until one of 2 things can happen. Either somebody has run out of all of their tokens, or there is 1 or less city tile that's left on the board. As soon as one of these 2 conditions are met, the game ends immediately. You don't go around the table to complete a set of rounds, so it is possible that there may be an uneven number of turns amongst the players. So something for you to just be aware of. The game end is not triggered when this runs out, so it is possible that at the end of my turn, let's say if I had already placed these, so I'm just going to move these to the side for illustration purposes, and let's say I placed these 3 tokens, and let's say I can only refill my hand up to the 2 that I have left over. So I will refill the one that I can refill, but I obviously now have a smaller hand than I would be allowed. The game will still continue, but on the next turn, if I'm able to place whatever number I have on my supply and I've exhausted both my reserve and my hand, that is what triggers the end of the game. So 2 endgame triggers for you to keep in mind. So the game will continue in that sense until one of these 2 conditions are met, and at that point, whoever has the most points wins. It is important to note that the game moves at a fairly quick clip, and it can get a little cutthroat, especially if you're playing with a larger player count, because as you're looking to spread out and connect yourself to different cities and have symbols that match up to these so that you can score with a long winding path, others may try to cut you off, so it can get a little bit mean. But I'll leave for you to discover most of that on your own. With that, let's have a quick look at some of these styles, and then we'll talk about the variant that we had spoken about earlier. So this style you can turn in and just basically get 10 points. And this can be done any point at any point on your turn. So the plus 10 is basically just 10 victory points for you to keep in mind. This one is for scoring purposes. Whenever you're scoring cities, you will always consider yourself, if you have this, to have one more city than you really do. So on every turn that you're, collecting a city tile and scoring those, or somebody else is scoring it and you're getting points as well, or you're collecting a farm token that has these scoring symbols, for all of these purposes, you will always consider yourself to have one more city than you actually have. This one will increase your hand size to 7. We already had a look at this earlier. This is the other one-time use one, and basically what this does is anytime once you're done with your turn, you can sort of like flip this over, and using it means you immediately get another full turn. And this is another full turn, so everything from placing the tokens, scoring ziggurats and cities, up to refilling your hand. So you're going through the entire set of steps all over again, and not just doing things with remaining tokens that you may have. So it's fairly useful if you can time it right. And some of the others I'll quickly just re-clarify, because the symbology can get a little confusing. But you can also have a look at the reference sheet at the back of the rulebook as well. Where is this one? So this is basically one where, if you remember, we had said that only farmers can go onto the farm tiles. But if you're using this, you can send noble tokens onto farm tiles as well. So the symbol basically has your noble tokens going onto farm tiles as a reminder. Over here, if you have this, if you remember, you could only play 3 or more tokens if you had farmer tokens that you're placing out. But if you have this, you can play 3 different nobles face up as well, instead of the 2 clan tokens options that you have. So this is what you need if you want to play more than 2 noble tokens on your turn. And this is where I'll just quickly check and confirm. Oh, so this is where when you're playing the action where you can play 3 or more farmers, you can also play 1 noble token face up alongside the 3 or more farmers action. So it becomes a combination of 3 or 4 or 5 farmers, whatever it is that you're playing out, plus 1 more noble token. And I think we've gone through all of the additional ones as well. There are 2 more of these variant tiles that come with the game, and I'll leave for you to, once you're done with a few games with the base set of tiles, to discover what these do. But just keep in mind that the way that these will work is you will still always use 7 tiles in a game. You will take out 2 tiles from this default setup and insert these 2 tiles in at that point. Yeah, and with that, I think that pretty much is it for all the rules that we need to cover. Just keep in mind that you're scoring points constantly throughout the game, so there is no such thing as end game scoring. Everything that you score is going to be live and dynamic, and you will always have a good sense of who's ahead and who's not. So with that, let's go back to the table, and I'll maybe just close up with some final thoughts. All right, folks, so that was the rules teach for Babylonia. Hopefully give you a good sense of how the game works and plays, and you can hopefully get the game to the table a little bit easier and faster without having to go through the rulebook yourself. If you have any questions or comments or thoughts, feel free to leave them in the comment section down below. I'll just maybe add a couple of quick comments as we sort of like wrap this up. The game is fast, so keep that in mind. It goes along at a very fast clip. Turn orders are really fast. In my experience, I've not seen a lot of AP with this one, so factor that in. The back of the box says game length is 60 minutes. That is definitely at the higher end. If you're playing a 2-player game, you're probably looking at getting it done in 30 to 40 minutes easily, perhaps even for your first game. And if you're playing a 4-player game, maybe you can stretch, it can go up to 40, 45 minutes. But 60 would definitely be on the higher end if somebody's really taking the time, or you factor in the teach time for that first play for everybody around the table. So keep that in mind. Other than that, the game can have a bit of a mean streak, so make sure that you're okay with that. But it is all, of course, in good nature and good fun. It can be competitive. So with that, that's it for this video. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and I'll see you at the next one. Take care, guys.